Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, August 27th, 2019. Happy Tuesday to you. I always feel kind of sad when the month of August is whittling down to just a few days. Fall will be around the corner. Well, it'll be here before you know it, the great month of September. And then it is holiday time. And where did 2019 go? In light of possible rebuilding of the Lisa Marie, I've obviously had a lot of messages. I've had a lot of Gmails. I've had a lot of negative comments and quite a few positive comments too. I've appreciated all the input from some of the mechanics out there and some of the motorheads and RV people that really know a heck of a lot more than I do, and I admit that right off the top. I have had extensive experience. When I was 2015, I had a 1951 Chrysler Crown Victoria. It was a big boy, and it was the early Hemi engine, and I remember the very deep ceramic socket spark plug covers there, the spark plug caps, and pulling them out, and just being amazed at the Chrysler Hemi, the Power Flight, or whatever it was called, Firepower, I think it was at that time, and how much fun I had at 15 rebuilding the engine. Of course, it had the very early semi-automatic to tiptoe transmission where you would put it into drive, you would accelerate, and then you would let up when it was time to shift gears, and you just kept your fingers crossed that it would go into gear. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it didn't. Well, when I moved on and decided to get an RV in 1915, many of you in 2015, many of you were not aware that I had a 1974 GMC motorhome, one of the real classic ones. Just think back to the movie Stripes with Bill Murray and John Candy, and you'll get an idea what that was. You can you can just put RV in my search box and you can find everything. I really enjoyed working on that and getting that backed up to snuff, fixing the generator, doing a lot of wiring work, doing some work on the carburation. It had the legendary Olds 455, the huge big block in there, and it was a lot of fun. And then I had a 1988 Coachman camper van, a year older than Elvis, that I also did extensive renovation, some interior work on that too. And that was a lot of fun to work on new electrical distribution system throughout. So when it comes to, and then of course now I have the van, I seem to get simpler as I get along because I don't need a lot, I don't want a lot. When it comes to thinking about rebuilding a van that's closing in on 31 years old, the question that I hear most often, is it even worth turning a wrench on? Well, it all depends. You know, on one side you have money, and on the other side you have build. Okay? And given a certain amount of money, you can do a certain amount of build. Now, if it's your home, it's different than being a standard recreational vehicle, that's for sure. Okay, if you live in it, the requirements are more stringent. It has to be heavier duty build throughout. Everything costs money. And as I said before, it's like a Chinese menu. You can choose the A combo, B combo, and C combo. Simple, middle of the road, and deluxe, depending on your financing. You can really, you can't have everything. But is it worth rebuilding it? The first consideration, of course, is always a power plant. That's the most overriding feature. If I had the C menu and unlimited funds, of course, I get to remove the hood. I get the A-frame out, the radiator, strip it out, everything. I pull the engine, and I just take it off to have the heads redone and new rings put on, and just call it, that's the A. Maybe slide in a rebuilt transmission on it. That's the C menu. That's the expensive one. Well, you don't always have that option, particularly when you're working on the A menu. So you really have to decide what's going to be the most functional thing for the price. Is it worth rebuilding? I think, of course, RVs and wheeled vehicles are always worth rebuilding, particularly if they are your home. And a lot of the main challenge that you face isn't so much the power plant, although it is most essential. The real thing is making sure that the rig is weatherproof in all seasons, particularly when it's in a climate that can go from extreme cold to extreme heat. You have expansion and contraction of materials that meet up and mate and have seams, and of course that's what pulls seams apart and causes untold difficulty. And once you get a leak into the RV and it penetrates the sidewalls and down to the floors, you get soft spots, well, then it's a real problematic thing. If you can keep that thing sealed in good shape and do routine maintenance, it's a good thing. It's going to go a long way towards the longevity. But I don't want to ever have people's expectations up here when the money's down here. Okay, that's the reality of things. And I understand that funds are going to be very limited, and that's the real bugaboo. You got to be very clever, but you also have to be mindful of what can be spent on it. And like I said, the A menu might just be, doing things like gutting the interior, some new cabinetry, which can be had very cheap from places like IKEA. And what do you care if it lasts 5 years or so? That's fine. New sink countertops, new water pump, sealing up the water tank. That's the A menu. Okay, making it nice again. The B menu is doing things like, and I'll be doing a separate live stream. I did a whole bill of work as if it was a C build. But a B build is reupholstering the front seats, and it's making it a lot nicer with upgrades like lighting, pulling new electrical throughout, that type of thing. But as I say, everything has its dependence on how much money is available. The other thing to be aware of, particularly when you're talking about Coachmen camper vans, is these are very heavy vehicles. I was astounded that they were 8,800 pounds, the unloaded weight, and you're pushing 9,000 pounds, over 4.5 tons on these vehicles. The stresses and strains, particularly on the suspension, are something that always worried me. And it's one reason I sold my 1988 Coachmen camper van, because I didn't like the weight over frame issues causing all kinds of problems, okay? But at least it's designed where they consider things like a center point of gravity and handling on the road. And you got to be very cautious when you do a rebuild that you don't screw around too much. It's one thing, gee, I'd like to have the water tank over here. I'd like to pull the generator out here and get rid of that and use that for something else. All those things affect the center of gravity and ultimately are going to affect the handling and performance of the rig. Especially if you start doing things like raising the floor, all of a sudden you have a higher center point of gravity. And you are more likely in an emergency situation to not be able to recover on a hard left or a hard right, and you could go over on your side and flip. So those are all things to be considered. It's not as simple as just throwing stuff in and rejigging things. Everything has to be engineered out to a pretty high degree in those things. As long as the requirements is the basic power plant is good, including, the transmission, the nice Windsor engine, the legendary Windsor engine, that's all good. But remember, when you have an A list, there's very few things that you're going to address on a powertrain. Maybe just tightening up some bands or something on a transmission and doing a little bit of work like that. Doing a cleaning on the injectors and other things on the rig. But otherwise, time and attention is on body and on the living area within, and making it as simple and functional as possible. Okay, here's the key. If you're not the neatest person in the world, then you have to build accordingly. Okay? You'll notice on things like road tracks and really nice Mercedes vans that Sprinter vans, that they have a lot of bells and whistles, and there's a lot of things to keep clean and a lot of things to keep functional in there. If you're going to live life real slim on the road, then the imperative is have the inside build as simplistic as possible so that you have ease of taking care of. For me, the most important thing of all of having an RV is how well are you going to sleep at night? That's the big key. Everything else works off of that. And that's, I think, is the main point to address, particularly if you're stuck doing an A build with a very limited budget. Yes, trim can be cheap and wood trim. It's not, you can make things look very nice on a budget. That's not the whole thing. But it is something to consider when you're thinking about rebuilding an older camper van. Is it worth it? Well, you know, I'm not going to say, it's not my place to say. If it was my home, the alternatives are few. Yes, get a job springs to mind. Short of getting a job, it really is a question of what makes the most sense for the limited funds that are available. You know, a lot of it comes down to a point of pride, of how nice you can make something look. And the other consideration, too, is you always hope that it will be taken care of when it is done. But once the keys are handed over, that's it. It's not your call anymore, right? Anyway, thanks for spending a few minutes with me this morning. Love having you guys on the channel. Getting ready for more RVing adventures ahead in Southern California, and a few nice surprises coming up with some local stuff to do too. Rest time is coming to an end. It's time to get out and about and doing some of those things that the channel has really become known for. I want to thank you all for being along this morning and have a wonderful, wonderful Tuesday.